Welcome to False Claims, Real Consequences.
Welcome to False Claims, Real Consequences, the podcast that breaks down high-stakes fraud cases with the legal experts who fight them. I'm John Clements. I'm here with Steve Teller, a national whistleblower attorney who has helped recover millions in cases involving tariff fraud, import scams, and federal violations. And today we're diving into how customs fraud works and how whistleblowers help stop it. Steve, welcome back to the show, friend.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, let's dig into it. Again, I'm excited to talk about this because I'm hearing words that I've heard in the media, tariffs and customs. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, it's been a quite a roller coaster that way.
It sure has.
But I do think that, increasing tariffs, especially suddenly like that, it definitely increases the incentives for companies, importers, whether they're foreign importers or importers based in the U.S. It really increases the incentives for them to be dishonest. I mean, their business model is built on the old tariffs. They picked a price point based on the old tariffs, all of that.
So that's a really good point. What does this dishonesty or fraud look like in the world of customs?
Well, there's a few different ways that a company could pretend and pay less tariffs. They could commit fraud essentially and pay less tariffs. And they can hide the country of origin because tariffs depend on where the item is coming from often. They could pretend that the item is really a different kind of item. Sometimes it's hard to tell whether, we're talking about, let's say, roof racks or, car seats, right? In terms of this harmonized tariff schedule, because the tariffs vary depending on the type of thing you're importing. And then, of course, there's also just, smuggling, where you're not declaring the actual thing at all and just hiding it, bringing it over somehow, pretending it's something else completely. Or just not declaring it, bringing it on a private boat or something like that. And so, and the fourth way of committing customs fraud is just misdeclaring the value of the thing that's being imported, right? So I say that it's worth much less than it actually is, and so my tariff percentage is way smaller.
Yeah, right. And so you mentioned, I want to dig in on one thing you mentioned. Maybe you've got a shipping container full of roof racks, but it's really actually car seats. So would that be considered like misclassification or like using a wrong tariff code? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's a good question. The misclassification issue is in a couple different ways. Like one is you're just stating falsely what the thing is that you're importing. And the other is to pick a different category that sort of applies. Then you're into kind of less of a fraud situation and more of a regulatory interpretation kind of a question.
Yeah, and I think I think maybe you had a case that you handled, like the bid buy truck case, where that was the case. Was that correct?
Yep, bid buy. The small business was buying trucks in Canada and selling them in the U.S. And my client is a very honest guy, and he took a job helping at that company, and he found, the purchase price and the sale price just didn't match the price that was being told to customs when the truck was being imported. And this just happened repeatedly. And it was a little hard for us because it was a small case, it's a small business person trying to make a living, but they were cheating. So, and my client really seems like his focus was on cheating is wrong. That's what bothers me.
Yeah.
So he said, how do I make this work? And I said, it's a small case, but if you have all the documents and they're well organized, then the government's going to be interested in it. And we were able to prove the fraud with the help of the Department of Justice.
It's interesting to me that you said that this happened over a period of time, because to me, I don't know, that makes it less likely that it was just an accident, if this happens over and over again.
Yeah, this wasn't an accident. This was, pretty clear. There were, I think he found about 60 specific cases, and it was sort of all the light trucks, which had a 25% import tariff from Canada, whereas the sedans or other, non-light truck vehicles that were being imported, he wasn't doing the same thing.
Yeah, that's not painting a very good picture at all.
No. And, I hope the guy ends up okay ultimately and pays the consequences and comes
Yeah.
out of it. But it's an expensive lesson for him to learn. The government
Yeah,
wanted,
absolutely.
much more back than the fraud that we proved. And they
Yeah,
often
yeah, I
have
can
triple
imagine.
damages.
Yep, it's almost like you just shouldn't commit fraud in the first place.
Well, I mean, doing things right means you have less history to keep track of and worry
That's
about,
right.
and less to
That's
worry
right.
about in the past. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Take it
Well,
from me.
yeah. So talk to me about aluminum imports because that's been all over the news lately, and I think you've also had experience with aluminum imports and how that can lead to fraud.
Yeah, that was a really interesting case. So, extruded aluminum products from China had an anti-dumping and countervailing duty. And what that means is extruded, think about how they make pasta, right? They push it out through something, they're extruding it and they're cutting it off and it's in the shape. And it may be true that other types of aluminum also had that, but the anti-dumping duties were like basically China was subsidizing its aluminum industry in some way, and the U.S. government said we're going to protect our own aluminum industry by not allowing you to just dump that cheap aluminum on us. And this company, they make bike racks, and they found out through indirectly through being asked by customs about something else. They realized they owed about $1 million in tariffs on extruded aluminum, and they figured out how much it was going to be, and they got all ready to tell the government. And then I believe ownership of the top leadership of the company said, maybe we just keep that to ourselves.
Oh, no, no, no.
And yeah, so then they said, well, here's our whole disclosure is about 400,000, and they ignored the extra million. So my client said you shouldn't do that, and he basically stopped having a solid relationship with the company at that point, and ultimately was let go a bit later. And then we made that report, and the company had to pay 3.4 million, if I recall correctly, because of their $1 million of fraud.
Yeah, that's whew. I just
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know what to say about that other than my gosh, don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes, but
Yeah,
we got to own them when we make them.
exactly.
It's really, I mean, I can just tell you from personal experience, it's just better to own up and move on rather than you just don't want it hanging over your head. I mean, that company would have had that problem for 6 or even 10 years, waiting for somebody who knows about it to turn it in, or someone who finds it to turn it in.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, just pay what you owe. It's way easier for everyone, and it's funny because it actually cost them 3 times as much in the long run if they would just paid it to begin with.
And that's one of the issues with the False Claims Act in particular. There are triple damages.
Hmm.
Often, when the Department of Justice finds responsibility by the company, they settle for double damages, but they can go for triple if the company, doesn't want to resolve the case. And either way, it's a heck of a lot more than, just once you see the problem, turning it in and saying, we owe this. You're probably going to pay single damages and not have anybody go to jail and have other consequences.
Yeah, especially in a case like this where it seems in the way you're describing it that maybe the company wasn't aware of it. They weren't intentionally not paying this money, and it wasn't a problem until the leadership said, "Well, hold on a second." Like that's when the problem started.
That's what it looked like to me. I'm always an outsider at some level.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are conversations with my clients where it's like, wow, okay, they just told you to commit fraud, did they? Okay. But other times, we're putting together those pieces. And, we don't have any way of knowing in that case that before my client started opposing the problem, that they knew about it and were hiding it on purpose. But we do know when that other problem came up with the classification issue and customs said, what about this? Then the company, found the other thing and let it go, hid it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk too about country of origin labeling and how companies might commit fraud with, changing or manipulating that label.
Yeah. So first off, it's required that the country of origin be, on the product, either on the outside packaging or sometimes on the product itself. And not doing that can be a customs violation. So, I've heard of a case where, there's sort of a bulk product being sold at the hardware store, and the contractor knows this product is only made in China. And so he's able to turn in that company that is making or selling the product just because it wasn't labeled with the country of origin. Second, though, and these are hard to prove, these country of origin cases, because the customs would have to go there and look at the value of the change in the originating country. Okay, so what I mean is, if we bought a whole bunch of parts in China, shipped them to Taiwan, and assembled them there, the rule is a little confusing about what amount of value added in Taiwan makes it a product of Taiwan instead of a product of China, right? And especially if it's the same company owns, kind of both factories, they can manipulate the prices that they're selling it to themselves for, and it gets pretty hard to prove. So the much simpler cases are just the ones where it's coming from Mexico, and it says instead that it's coming from somewhere else.
Got it. Yeah, I was curious about the situations where you've got a product assembled in multiple countries and how that works. So it sounds like it just gets real complicated in a hurry, is what it sounds like.
That's been my experience so far. Now, we thought we had a pretty solid case with some heavy assembly in China, powder coating and dirty stuff, and then light assembly in Taiwan, where we just had, a water filter factory was the location to put together these items. And it seems like the value of the items shipped over would be much greater than the value of the labor in assembling them. And that's one of the tests that customs uses. But I think that was just too complicated for customs to prove, and they declined to intervene in that case.
Well, so we've talked about the legal consequences that some of these companies face when they get caught. So like the one company had 3 times the damages that they owed. How about for the whistleblowers? If you're a whistleblower, do you see any reward from that activity?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a primary motivator for many people. I mean, the additional motivator, of course, is I don't want them to cheat. They're ripping off everyone. They're cheating in the marketplace, or they're doing something illegal, and I just can't abide by that. I don't want to be involved in that. But that additional motivation is you can get a percentage of the recovery. So if you turn it in as a person who knows about the fraud from the inside of the company, and the Department of Justice decides, yep, you were right, then you're probably going to get something like 17%. And the range is 15 to 25, but it's hard to get above 20. So you're probably going to get something like 16, 17, 18% of the total recovery, meaning even with those double damages from the fraud. So, we had a $40 million recovery. My client got 16% of that in that cable company case. And when we had a $40 million recovery and my client got 16%, that was $6.5 million. So, it was really life-changing money. And I love to be able to help people with that kind of thing.
You can help me get $6 million any day of the week, Steve.
All right. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So what should someone do if they're in, logistics or import compliance and they spot something that they think might be shady? What do they do?
Well, I do a little research first, right? They think might be shady. Okay, let's be more sure. You're pretty sure it's shady, right? Now you got to take a second and judge, do I talk to my boss about this or not? If the real motivation is trying to help the company do the right thing, yeah, talk to the boss about it. And if the boss can say, oh, no, you're wrong, here's why, great, you've just done your job. If the motivation is, hey, I think we can pounce on fraud, okay, maybe that's when you call the lawyer. Or if the boss refuses to explain the problem and gets mad about it, and that's defensiveness is something that's going to make you think maybe there really is a problem here. And again, I think it's time to call a False Claims Act attorney.
Got it. And then the last question for this episode, I really want to hit on, because I can assume if I was in a position where I needed to say something to someone, I'm probably thinking, I don't want this to get out of hand. I don't want the company to retaliate against me. I just want to go home and enjoy my family right at night. I don't want to deal with this. What would you tell someone in that scenario? Like, they know what the right thing to do might be, but they don't know if it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think calling an employment lawyer early is a great idea. And a lot of False Claims Act lawyers and employment lawyers, there's a lot of overlap, right? Like myself, 30 years of employment law, now focusing on False Claims Act. So if you call and say, I don't really know what to do in my job, I think there's a big fraud, let's figure out, is it really a fraud? How much could you make off of it? Would it be worth that? What will think about? How is it going to impact your career? Do you need to turn it in, or are you safe just going along with it? Most of the time, the Department of Justice is not interested in getting people in trouble for, my boss told me to do it. I didn't really know the difference. I wasn't sure. They said it was legal, so I did it. Is pretty different than, creating a scheme to defraud the government and knowingly, kind of initiating it. That's the people who the prosecutors, are looking at more closely. So I think just talking to a lawyer about what are your rights, being, exploring these kinds of questions, and then you get a chance to make an informed judgment about what's smart for you.
Yeah, I like that advice a lot. Go out, find some experts who know what they're talking about, make an informed judgment. That's great advice.
Yeah, I mean, and when you find an expert, listen. Sometimes I've had people they're telling me what they know about the law and they're not hearing what I know. And it's really a collaborative effort with lawyers, especially in the False Claims Act area. Often the client is the subject matter expert, and yet the lawyer can think through, how serious is this? What are the consequences of taking next steps? What does the law say about protecting yourself? I could do a whole episode on types of complaints. Do I want to write it in crayon and just keep a copy, and then it looks very informal, but I've documented it. Or do I want to draw down the heat of human resources because the fraud is so obvious that it'll get fixed if I do it,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great vision to end on, the crayon submission. That's perfect. I love it. So, Steve, thanks so much for coming on the show today. This is important stuff to talk about. I'm glad you're here to talk about it and let people know what's going on, how to approach things. So thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate the chance to talk about it. It is a passion for me. So, thank you.
Absolutely. That's it for today's episode of False Claims, Real Consequences. And hey, if you want to reach out to Steve, visit stellarlaw.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode so we can just get this information to the people who need it. And with that, I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.